Hello again. Here is a really weird fact. It is all but impossible to establish how many children in Britain have always lived with and been raised by both their mother and father. This state of affairs was, of course, the default setting until 50 years ago, but what used to be called the permissive society rather put an end to it. In the 1960s, abortion and sodomy were legalized, and divorce was made much easier. At the same time, feminists began to claim that men were the cause of all the problems in family life and that women were quite capable of raising children without any father, and that this would be even better for the kids. All this coincided with waves of immigration from the Caribbean, where stable marriage was not held in such high regard, and there was something of a tradition for women raising children without the father being overly involved. The results of this interesting social experiment are all around us today, and the effects of the lack of fathers all too apparent. I wanted to find some figures about this before making this video, but I soon ran into difficulties. It is easy enough to find the number of single parent families and also to see how many of them are headed by women and how many by men. But finding out how many children live with their biological fathers is really not at all straightforward. One can see how many married couples there are and how many children live with them, but it's not possible to say whether those children belong to both parents or if this is a so-called blended family. Some of these surveys talk about children living with a father, as though it was possible for a child to have more than one father. What they mean by this is that the child lives with his or her mother, who is cohabiting with a man who also lives with the woman and her children, and is therefore a father, as in represents or stands for a father. As for how many married couples are living with children who are all their own biological offspring, though, which was once the most natural thing in the world, this figure is not really available. The reason this matters is that both boys and girls suffer terribly if they do not grow up with their fathers. We know the ill effects on boys, and we see many instances of this in both Caribbean and white families. It has been hypothesized that the black gangs are so attractive to young men because they provide a substitute for the male attention and guidance which the boys should be receiving from their fathers. The effect on girls, though, can be just as dreadful. Girls growing up without their fathers tend to have sex at an earlier age, are more likely to have illegitimate babies and abuse illegal drugs, less likely to succeed academically, and more likely to end up with psychiatric problems or eating disorders. I mentioned several factors in the destruction of the traditional nuclear family in Britain, but without doubt feminism is the chief culprit. By focusing on the bad things that some men do, and even asserting that all men were really rapists and domestic abusers at heart, feminism encouraged the growth of the single parent family, which is based on the falsehood that children don't need fathers and are in fact better off without them. One need only glance around at young people today to see that those growing up in homes where their fathers do not live are not really doing much better as a result, to say the least of it. We used to call this setup a broken home, and for good reason. The absence of fathers living with their own children as they grow up has caused many of the problems which we see around us now in modern society. Feminism really has something to answer for here.